We're about a year out from the 2020 election. There are a lot of people who are understandably obsessed with what to expect. People that are obsessively looking at swing state polls, breaking down head-to-head matchups, trying to figure out mentally what exactly does a white working-class voter in Michigan want? What do they want for a presidential candidate? But this week, those people did not need to rely on polls. This week, we got our very first actual concrete data about politics and voting behavior in the impeachment era. It wasn't calling people up and asking who they're going to vote for. It happened on the ground, and it's much better data to analyze than polls, I think. The top line from election night on Tuesday night was there was a lot of good news for Democrats. They won a governor's race in deep red Kentucky. They took unified control of the government in Virginia, and Democrats did extremely well in the suburban districts that are seen as crucial to winning the elections in 2020. There was also data to give people opposed to the current Republican Party a lot of concern. Here to dig into what we learned, one of the best analysts out there, MSNBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. How are you, buddy? If one of the biggest trends, I think it's fair to say, in the Trump era, since that 2016 election, in special elections, in the midterms, is the suburbs, right? What is going on in America's suburbs in the Trump era?
I think a couple of things. Number one, just in terms of opposition to Trump, the energy, the motivation to get out and vote, it's very clearly there. It's a big story in the 2018 midterms. It's a story in Pennsylvania this week. You talked, there were local elections, county elections in Pennsylvania, suburbs of Philadelphia. Democrats were taking over governments there in some places they hadn't led in decades, and in much more than decades in some places. So,
and just to interrupt, those races, those Pennsylvania races, Pennsylvania did not have, Virginia's on this weird schedule, so there's a bunch of people on the ballot. Those were real just local county races that are happening in Pennsylvania, people still coming out.
And I think what it reflected there is, like, what's the connection between a county race and President Trump and national politics? I think what you're seeing there is the syncing up of national politics with everything down ballot from there, because you have counties there in southeast Pennsylvania that have been trending towards the Democrats. Some places there where Democrats took over. Hillary Clinton had won by 9 points in one county, by 22 points in the other county. Still, there was residual Republican strength at the local and county level. And I think this is one of the stories of the Trump era, is everything below president on the ballot is kind of coloring itself in. But is this a red area, a blue area? So I think that's one of the things you're seeing there in Pennsylvania and other places.
There was also some interesting results in the Cincinnati suburbs.
Sure,
there's a few little counties up there in the sort of northern corner of the state in Kentucky, next to Cincinnati, across the Ohio River, that really helped that Democrat pull off that upset victory.
So this is a really interesting story, because Matt Bevin, the Republican governor, lost for a bunch of reasons. But if he had gotten the normal Republican result in these three counties you're talking about, and they account for 10% of the vote statewide. If he'd done what a Republican normally does, he is still the governor. Instead, the Democrat actually won 2 of the 3 counties.
Which is just not really heard of in sort of big races like this.
No, absolutely not. Trump, in these counties, you're talking Trump getting in the high 50s to the high 60s. In these races, Bevin was getting in the 40s into the low to mid 50s. So this was a terrible performance for a Republican there. The question is, did that reflect the same thing we're talking about in Pennsylvania and nationally, or did that reflect something that was more Bevin specific? And the reason I think that's a question is there were 5 other elections in Kentucky this week, 5 other statewide elections. The other 5 Republican candidates got the normal Republican number in those 3 counties. So was that Bevin, or was that more the Trump era sort of factor we're talking about?
Well, that leads to me the big question about the suburbs, which is, are we seeing that some kind of pendulum, right? Or are we seeing a realignment? So if you go back to 2010 and you look at a lot of these suburban areas, they moved hard to the right during those midterm elections in 2010. They said a lot of Republicans, a lot of Republican local legislators, right? A lot of Republicans take over the state houses. And that's a kind of motivational question of who's coming out to vote largely in those midterms. But then the other comparison is the way that the solid South used to be Democratic, and then they started voting for Republicans at the presidential level, and then they moved down the ballot until every last county commissioner is now a Republican as well. What do you think the evidence says about what we're seeing in the suburbs being something permanent or something that's cyclical?
Nothing in politics is permanent.
Well,
but is it longer term?
Right,
is it longer term? I think it's longer term, because we already know it's longer term. We have a longer term trend in American politics going back decades now, where we talk about white college educated versus non-college. And what we've seen for decades now is a trend in the Democrats' favor among white college educated voters, and a trend decidedly away from the Democrats and towards the Republicans among non-college whites. So if you take that And then you add in the fact that the suburbs generally in a lot of places are getting more racially, more ethnically diverse Democratic constituencies for a long time now. Those two factors, I think it's a long-term trend. It does not show any sign of ebbing.
Yeah, and that last point is important, too, because what the composition of the suburbs is changing is a big part of the story. The other part of the story to me is turnout, right? Yep. So the good news for Republicans in the Trump era is they really are juicing turnout in these rural red districts and goosing enormous margins, right? I mean, we did see that, particularly in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we saw it in Pennsylvania, by the way.
Yeah.
We have this story of Philadelphia suburbs. Go to Western Pennsylvania. There are counties in Western Pennsylvania that are the mirror image, that are long-term Democratic counties that flipped to Republican on Tuesday. And I think there's a cautionary note here for Democrats who look at results like you had this week and extrapolate that and say, well, there it is, it's going to happen in 2020. It's the words of Chuck Schumer from about 2 months before the 2016 election. And he was asked about Pennsylvania.
This is the trade he talked about.
Clinton-Trump is big in Pennsylvania, key Senate race in Pennsylvania. He said, don't worry, we're fine, he said to Democrats. We will lose for every one Union Democrat we lose in Western Pennsylvania. We gain 2 suburban Republicans outside Philadelphia. Math didn't work out that way.
Right. The trade did not work.
Right.
But on election night, at least at the gubernatorial level and in Virginia, it has been working. And it's generally been working in the suburbs in 2018 in special elections. Matt Bevin, if I'm not mistaken, he gets 200,000 more votes, right, than 2015, and he still loses because both sides are so activated.
Massive turnout. 1.4 million people turned out in that Kentucky gubernatorial election. The last time around there, the one you're talking about, 2015, 973,000. You're basically having a 50% increase in turnout there. Midterm turnout last year, you're talking over 115 million people. Normally, you're getting about 85 million. In a presidential election, you get 130. I think there's talk next year, just given these turnout trends we're seeing, 145, 150 million, easily going to be the highest turnout, just by raw numbers, the highest turnout presidential election in our history.
And I know, my brother has worked in campaigns his entire adult life, and, campaigns at the beginning of a campaign, a well-run one, will think of what their vote number is. Like literally, how many votes do we need? And they'll do the math, and that will be what determines the entire field plan. It'll determine a lot of their advertising buys, right? They're trying to figure out, how do we add up enough votes to hit the number we need? And one of the things that sometimes happen that leads to upsets, Joe Crowley and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is that you just get the vote number wrong. Right? You say we need this many votes. Matt Bevin probably said to himself, if I get 700,000 votes, I'm probably good to go. And he got 700,000 votes.
No, the turnout is swamping all expectations. But and it works both ways. I can't stress it enough.
Totally.
Because we talk about rural areas, you talk about exurban areas where Republicans are still showing strength, as you see in Pennsylvania there. The big X factor in all of this is that the suburbs, that the sort of anti-Trump folks in the suburbs are determined to get out there in every single election right now and vote against Republicans. But put Donald Trump's name back on the ballot, put him front and center. There is still a lot of ground that Republicans could gain yet in those rural areas.
Yeah, and someone said, I think there's about 45 million white non-college voters that are not voting. There is a big pool. It is not the case that the Trump base as a sort of electoral force is maxed out mathematically at this point.
Right. No, and I think the dynamic here you're really seeing, we talk about polarization, tribalism. Each side is just reacting to the other.
Right.
And the best source of turnout for one side is the other.
Right. Steve Kornacki, that was great. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Great. Coming up, what happens when a president and Congress essentially go to war? Emily Bazelon of the New York Times Magazine's got a great new piece on just that, and she will tell us, don't go away.
You're watching MSNBC International.
This is Milton, and Milton's been out here, and he's been standing in front of this police line only a foot or two away. The thing that caught my attention was you've been walking by hugging people.
Yeah. All I ask is just for peace. Like Bob Marley said, one love. That's why I'm out here. I'm out here showing love and letting these guys and these men and women know that we support them, just like our military. We support our military. It's just as simple as that. I'll stand out here. These are my brothers and sisters.
I love the magic of politics, the sheer human spirit of the maverick, the pro, the hero. You can have the one-note wonders, the flip-floppers, the hacks. Give me the gutsy, the grown-ups, the honest. Give me the ones with fire in their bellies. Those I can take and cheer nonstop.
It was a day like any other. What are they doing up this early?
We came around the table with friends and family members, world leaders and world-class thinkers. We had Democrats, Republicans, even one or two with an independent streak. We were there to exchange ideas, have a conversation, and even laugh, just like we've been doing for the past 10 years. So we really want to thank you for making us a part of your morning routine. Thank you for being part of our family.
The full story never stands behind a podium.
Do you think this is a problem for the president?
It's too wily for that, far too elusive.
Do you believe this could be a cover-up?
So you think now is the time to have this policy debate?
The full story needs to be drawn out.
Is this new big wall going to stop Mexicans from coming to the U.S.?
Tracked down and boxed in.
There appears to be a clash between police and counter-protesters.
The full story is a long, long way from the headline.
You can see that.
And that's the distance we cover.
Are there rules anymore for our politics? And if so, will anybody play by them? These days, politics could use a little refereeing. And we're not afraid to blow the whistle.
Before it was the biggest political scandal in history, before it lent its name to every other scandal for 40 years, it was just an office building, the Watergate. What happened here changed history because there were reporters who never stopped asking questions. For my generation, the questions were about WMDs in Iraq, and we learned, again, don't just accept the official line. Now, who knows where the questions will take us, but I do know this. I'm not going to stop asking them.
The woman sitting next to me at the counter at the diner, she turns to me and says, "Please tell Larry O'Donnell that he needs to run for president." And I was like, that I will do. That does it for us tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow. Now it's time for the last word with the aforementioned Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel. So it's my turn to blush, yes. As I've been doing here.
There is a very nice lady named Judy who definitely wants you to run for president.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Tough on our leaders.
It is a massive transfer of wealth to the wealthiest people in this country.
Love for our ideals.
This is a government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Tough love, administered nightly.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.